Okay, so I am going to start by introducing Barb. So for those of you just joining us, or those of you who've been waiting for a minute, thank you so much for joining our third Exemplify session brought to you by Select Path. My name's Melissa Maloney, and I am excited to be here with you today. I'm more excited, though, to announce our speaker for today. So today we are learning about small steps to boost resilience. Dr. Barb Chambers has about 24 years experience as a clinical psychologist and has enjoyed working in forensic hospital and corporate settings, as well as private practice in Calgary. Her work involves helping people with mood concerns, stress, relationship difficulties, traumatic events, and workplace mental health. She works with a variety of clients, including RCMP and elite athletes, on stress management, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and mental training. Barb strives to provide a compassionate environment where people can share their concerns, problems, strengths, and goals to work towards positive changes. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Barb.
Thank you very much. And hi, thanks, Melissa. And thank you, everyone, for taking time to attend today. So today we're going to be exploring a few tips and tricks to boost resilience. And it's broadly going to be divided into the what to do, and then at the end, the how to do it. Because as most of us know, a lot of the time we know the what to do, but the how to do it can kind of slide off the rails a little bit. And I've picked sort of tools predominantly from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, and positive psychology. And the reason I've honed in on these is they're tools that I've used for a long time, but they've been really useful in the past 2 challenging years to help people boost their resilience. So I really hope that you'll learn something, that you'll sort of feel and experience something, and that you'll take away something, even a small step, to help you boost your resilience. So we can switch to the next slide. Thank you, Melissa. So I just want to go over the mental health basics, and many of you may have seen this before. This continuum just describes a human experience from very good health or mental well-being all the way to mental illness or mental disorder. And the green zone, we all know, this is when things are going well, we're enjoying life, mood, relationships, work, things are just going well. And if you're in this zone right now, this is really a good time to start to put some of the resilience tips in place, because we've got good resources to do it. The yellow-orange zone is when we would call it sort of mental health problem zone. And all of us have been in this one too. So this is where you're functioning, but not really coping that well. And some of the things we would see here or experience would be, excessive worry, bad sleep, feelings of self-doubt, thoughts of suicide, burnout, irritability, withdrawing from friends and family, frustration. Now, these are normal. They're normal short-term reactions that usually occur in response to difficult situations. That's why we've seen quite a rise in stuff like this in the past 2 years. And they're also a good place to use the strategies we'll talk about today. And then the final area, the red zone, the mental illness or mental disorder. This is when sort of everyday stresses and how we are responding are kind of becoming something more. And I think the big overall thing is then what you're feeling, what you're thinking, or what you're doing is really causing significant distress or impairment in, your work, your relationships, your relationship to yourself. So this would be when someone has a major anxiety disorder, like major depression, many anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance use disorders. There's a large continuum. And this is when people are feeling despair or crippling anxiety, high thoughts of suicide. And this would be a time where you really need to reach out for help from professionals and from people who love you, because it's not a time to struggle alone. And whether it's to start out by reaching out to your GP, distress line, EAP, pastor, other religious person, a mental health support, and friends and family. And in terms of using these strategies, I'm not going to say that you don't use what we'll talk about, because I have clients who do, but there are two risks here. One is you're not at your best. So people will start beating themselves up thinking they're not doing a very good job of making change. And so I just caution people there. It's not that the tools aren't useful, but most of the time when we're in the red zone, it's hard for us to take on new challenges. So just to be aware of that. We can go to the next slide. So this is just an overview very quickly of what we'll be looking at today. We're going to talk about resilience, the factors that contribute to our resilience, quick overview of stress, everyday stress versus trauma. And then I think everyone knows it, but the threat response we'll go over. Then I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to deal with stress and adversity using the 3 A's. And we are really going to focus on physical and emotional and cognitive flexibility or fitness. So we can zip to the next one. Sure, what is resilience? Well, it really is the capacity to adapt or recover in the face of adversity. And the adversity can be, failure, trauma, harassment, relationship problems, financial problems, health problems, workplace issues. So really it's just your plan. Resilience is how you adapt to and recover from stress. And, normal stress is something that we all need. If we didn't have stress, we'd be dead. Like, we need stress. And it's just a threat to equilibrium. So it becomes good or bad stress depending on our ability to cope and adapt to it successfully. And as we cope and adapt to stress, we begin to develop our resilience. And one of the things here I often like to just kind of go over, because we all use the term stress and it's used so widely. If we think of the 4 main parts, there's the stressor or the situation. So there's I missed my flight. They've given me more work at work. That's the stressor. Then there's your personal reaction to the situation. And so like, I might miss my flight and it doesn't bother me. Melissa might miss her flight, stress. So it's our own personal reaction to it, where we were saying, I am feeling a lot of stress. And then there's that ongoing back and forth transaction between you as a person and the stressor. So we all know that phenomenon, that different people are different in how they respond to different situations. But when we appraise a threat, and this would be the threat response, that's that fight, flight, or freeze. It's when something is big enough that our response is, emergency. And we go on high arousal, prefrontal cortex kind of stops doing it just lets the amygdala take over, and you do what you have to do. If we're doing well, so if we are having a sort of healthy emergency response, we will then go back to sort of equilibrium, nice, normal parasympathetic nervous system. We're back to calm. But one of the things that happens is the way that we appraise stress, in other words, what we tell ourselves about our emotions and our thoughts, these days kind of is keeping us in this place where we're going threat, threat, threat. And that's one of the things that some of the strategies we'll talk about today will help boost our resilience by challenging how we're thinking and feeling. We can go to the next slide. So this is a big list. I think it comes from one of the resources at the end that we've listed at the end, but these are the many factors that can boost resilience for people. And you can see the ones that are in red are the ones that we'll be touching into today. But all of these are important things to boost your resilience. And, as you can see, these could be used to boost resilience to everyday stress. Like, I'm having an exam and I'm worried. Maybe I look at sort of cognitive and emotional flexibility to manage that. Or these can be used when it's a much bigger trauma. Because we think of, I didn't talk a lot about trauma. I meant to say that trauma is when the definition keeps changing, but really it's an event that is not an everyday experience for most people, and there's some sort of actual or threatened harm to the person. And that can be child abuse, it can be sexual abuse, major vehicle accident, any form of physical violence, kidnapping, et cetera, et cetera. You can use these resilience factors, and a lot of the literature is focused on when people are in quite traumatic situations and survive and thrive. So that you will see that both things are considered: everyday stress, but also what we would consider traumatic situations. So all of these come into play for any individual, and it can be everyday stress, it can be major trauma. And these factors kind of interact in us, and they're part of us as human beings. So if you just, take 10 seconds here to sort of think about which ones of these might you have used over the past couple of years to boost your resilience, like just sort of look at that and reflect for a sec. And then we can go to the next slide. So this is also, I believe, in one of the handouts where they've kind of discussed the 4 main ways we can deal with stress and adversity to help boost our resilience. So these are your choices, and any of them are a good choice when they either eliminate or minimize your stress response. And as I said previously, I would look at the resources at the end because they really go into detail on these. We're going to consider accept. So this is accept the things or the people you really cannot change, and also including accepting your own emotions when they happen, which we will focus on. Alter is more altering your environment so that it would be something like saying to your boss, a lot of work on my plate. This is how I would prioritize. What do you think? So you're interacting with the external environment to reduce stress. Exercise is a great one for this, as well as something that sounds weird that we're doing at the end, but it's a way to do change in behavior, and it's called Woop. The other one, avoid, is just avoid unnecessary stress. The classic here that we all know is, learn to say no, learn to not take on more. And then adapt is a big one. It's when you use your internal thinking processes to think accurately, and we will be focusing on that one. So we can go on to the next slide. We are not going to talk a lot about this, but I have it here because it's very important. And so really we could do a whole presentation on this. Exercise is, as it says here, boosts emotional resilience, it increases your mood, it increases self-esteem. I'm just looking at all of the physical or all of the psychological benefits of physical activity. So they're not just for the body, they're for the mind. And if you're thinking of increasing, supporting, boosting your resilience, then continuing or starting some regular physical activity or exercise is your goal. So this might be your what I want to change towards the end that you might come back to. And we'll discuss some of the strategies, the how, the using very small steps, a few hacks, I call them, from the How to Change book. And even if you do the Woop, you might decide to Woop, I want to exercise. So that's just in here we won't talk about it, but it's important. On to the next slide, please. So emotional and cognitive flexibility is really key to navigating really stressors and boosting resilience. And this is whether they're routine or extreme and traumatic events. And so what this means is that to develop emotional flexibility and cognitive, we need to accept our emotions and think accurately. So those are the 2 areas we're going to focus in on here. It's very it's very basic internal stuff, but it's kind of the core. And if people even in small ways develop these steps, it's really helpful. So we can go on to the next slide. So first big point, neither deny nor obey your emotions, just accept them. And I do have all this stuff about acceptance and commitment therapy here, and I'll probably come back, like we'll leave it here for a second, but I will come back to this. I decided it was more useful to put it a little bit further along. So I'm just going to talk about emotions right now. So if you think about it, our emotions, our feelings, like our thoughts, those are mind events. You know, they're in our mind. They give us information that help us navigate the world. You know, they help us learn. They solidify memory, they keep us safe. They're good data. Our emotions are good things for us to take in. But the two questions that we need to ask ourselves always is this emotional data, like our thinking data, is it accurate, first of all, or is it incomplete, distorted, wrong? And what is my best response when I get this emotional data? So research shows us that really it's often point two, what is the best response, that causes us the most problems. And that's what we'll return to when I talk a bit more about ACT, about what do we do once we've acknowledged emotion. So two things with the neither deny nor obey emotions. The first one is that we deny them. We tell ourselves we're not allowed to feel what we're feeling. You know, a good example would be, feeling nervous before this presentation. So I say to myself, well, I shouldn't feel nervous. What's wrong with me? When most people feel a bit nervous, range of nervous before public speaking. So it's pushing away our emotional response. And it makes sense that we do this because really feeling negative emotions is not fun. And we start to just sort of suppress them and ignore them. This is a good thing if we do it consciously. So if you think about, elite athletes in performance, they will purposely and consciously practice suppressing anxiety and fear. Or police officers, in crisis situations, they need to automatically and purposely suppress those emotions that they're feeling so they can do their job. But the problem is when we develop an automatic, patterned, unconscious way that we just deny emotion. And that means that we're missing out on a lot of good information from ourselves. You know, if we think about it, avoiding emotion is a good, quick relief strategy, but not good for long-term strategy to manage and boost resilience, really. I always think of it as, if I'm going to be submerged underwater, it's a good short-term strategy for me to hold my breath. But if I'm going to be living underwater, that, it is not a good idea for me to think that's my one strategy, to just suppress. And since we're in the long haul with our emotions, it's a good idea to sometimes be paying attention and accepting them as they come. But then flip side, obeying emotion. Sometimes people think that their emotion, is 100% true and must drive their action. So that can be another way that we make mistakes. We know from our own experience and also from research that our emotions will often be giving us incomplete, distorted, or biased information. And so to believe that can be a problem. So important steps on these 2 points, accepting, not denying emotion, but not sort of obeying it, are that you accept what's going on. For example, if I'm feeling sad, it's like, I'm human, humans have emotion. It makes sense I would feel sad in this experience now. So that is sort of one of the strategies for acceptance. Then it's kind of, how do I use this? If I know I'm sad, then what do I do? And we will talk more about this when we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy. One of the sort of little analogies I saw once, or stories really, is somebody said our emotions are like sort of like the rain. Like we decide it's raining, we notice it's raining, but then it's up to us to decide what to do. So if we're outside and it starts to rain, we have many possible decisions to make. The same as when we feel an emotion, particularly the negative ones, anger, fear, anxiety, sadness. We have choices about what we want to do. And I forget who said this, but it's always stuck with me that, think of your emotions as being good if you're in the business world. Emotions are good consultants, but they're poor CEOs. So in other words, you let your emotions, like a consultant, work for you, give you input, but you, as the CEO of yourself, make the decisions. You let your emotions work for you, not the other way around. And we can go on to the next slide, because we've just talked about emotional flexibility. In order to develop cognitive flexibility, we need to think accurately. And this is because our thoughts give rise to our emotions and our behaviors. Sometimes this is hard to accept, that not all of your thoughts are facts. And many are beliefs that we hold. And sometimes we've had these beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about others for so long that we believe that they're facts. And a very important concept from CBT is that our thoughts, our beliefs, our interpretations of the stressor, the outside event, influence our emotions and our behaviors. And this is really important for our emotional state, because to boost our resilience, we need accurate thinking. I think if you think a little bit about, for example, if I'm at home alone on a stormy night and I hear a crash, if my thinking is, oh my God, there's a burglar in the house, I think we all know kind of what my emotions and my behavioral response might be. Versus if I hear a crash, it's a stormy night, I'm home alone, and I go, oh, the dog has knocked over the whatever again. Different emotions, different response. So we want to be sure that when we're thinking about things, our thoughts are accurate. And as I say here, thoughts are like viruses. If you let the long runs dominate the system, they can cause harm. And really the reason our thoughts are inaccurate is we had kind of got those two processes going on in our brain. One is the kind of like central control processes. One is the control ones, which are slow, take a lot of energy. You need to concentrate and give thought to what you're doing. And so those would be ones like if you're learning to drive a car, for example. When you first learned, you probably had to pay attention, go slow. It took some effort to do it. Now, most of us drive automatically. There will be times driving from point A to point B, we drive safely, but we're like, how did I get here? Because we've gone into total automatic. And these automatic processes, the second process, they're really important to us as humans, because they allow us to do something without much energy, mental energy. And that allows us to save that energy for things that need our attention and focus and concentration. So the automatic thoughts that we develop, which we've developed since we were children, they're kind of outside of our awareness a lot of the time, like breathing and driving a car. We're not thinking that we have an automatic thought. So if they're functional thought habits, this is a good thing. Like if I think, oh, I make a mistake, it's like everyone else, I'll learn from that. That promotes resilience. But unfortunately, many of our functional thoughts are things like anything short of perfection is failure. So that limits us. We judge ourselves negatively, we feel bad, and our automatic belief isn't correct, that perfection is the only form of success. So although they may have played a purpose at some time, these automatic negative thinking habits are not good. So in order to kind of change those ineffective thinking, in order to think accurately, first we need to become aware of them. That takes a bit of slowing down. So anyone who meditates, or even you take 2 deep breaths, what am I thinking? It's just beginning those small practices of like, what am I telling myself right now? Or what thoughts come up for me in this kind of a situation? And then think that that first thought you have might just be an old habit, might be an automatic thought, might not be accurate, and is not always like truth revealed. Because thoughts are not always world events, they're mind events. So all of us at times need to kind of just observe our thoughts dispassionately. You know, we might engage with it, the thought, or we might let it go by. Depends. It might be the, oh, here I go again, feeling anxious about this. I notice I'm feeling anxious, but we don't grab onto it and believe it. An example is like a doorman in a hotel. Not many of us have been there lately, but you know, they just let people in and let them go by. So you can kind of be the doorman of your own thoughts. You let them come in, you might engage with them, you might just let them go by. And so another really useful tactic is observe, don't judge, and then maybe begin to challenge the thought and think to yourself, what else might be going on here? Why would I be thinking this? Are there other reasons that this happened? You know, what feels most likely here on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, I'm going to fail at this presentation. I might say, no, that's not that likely on a scale of 1 to 10. I might feel a bit anxious about it, but so we start to really ask ourselves questions about our thoughts to be sure that we are thinking accurately. And then we can choose the thought that is based on the best evidence. And the best time to do this, I will say, is not in the middle of a crisis. I know this from long experience for clients and myself. It's usually when you have a bit of calm time to reflect, because once we're in that fight or flight mode, it's hard to do this thinking accurately procedure. And Melissa, if you don't mind going back to the slide that had the acceptance and commitment there, thanks. So this is really useful, this concept, to put together the accept your emotions, you know, don't deny or obey them, and think accurately. And what it is it's based on the assumption that we can't control our emotional responses, but we can step back from them. So the first is accept, which is really just accepting that some of our emotions, some of our thoughts are outside of our personal control. And then we want to just put in action, which is the choose. We choose what we might want to have or do or be, and then we take action. And really, if people take this approach, they tend to have a like a rich, full, and meaningful life, but also accepting that there are negative things and pain that go with that. So it really is very central to resilience in a lot of ways. And that's that would be the overall goal, is accept emotions and thoughts, choose my values, take action. Probably more sort of psychologically, technically, ACT really increases psychological flexibility, which is resilience. It's two things. The first is to be psychologically present. So that's that slowing down, being aware and non-judgmental of your thoughts and feelings. And then the second is to control your behavior, to do what you choose, what you value. It's something that I think in the pandemic was really apparent to me, because people had a hard time with acceptance of their own emotions. And so it's a process that I think maybe acceptance is a hard word for people. So sometimes I've said to people, maybe it's more like a willingness. A willingness doesn't mean that you like, enjoy, want to do, or desire something, but it means that you either have to or will make room for it, because And then you'll go on to do what you need to do. And I'll kind of give a quick example that describes this process from a teenage client. And, she said that I could share this without using her name, which I did. Very, 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 very distressed. This is at some critical point of the major lockdowns in the past 2 years. And she loved school, good in school, couldn't be in school. So she's angry and sad, mainly sad, crying a lot. So that's the acceptance piece. And, we spent some time there. This is in therapy, but we spent time that, yes, this is sad. It is very sad that you can't be at school, that you can't see your friends. And then the next phase, which of course I'm moving her through by asking questions, was, I just said, what do you miss about being in class so much? What is it about being in class that you miss? And she, took a lot of time, but it's helping her friends, using her smarts, because she's a smart kid, teaching other people. A little bit later on, it was like some autonomy from my parents, because she loves her parents, but she kind of been stuck at home with them forever. And so I said, oh, so, those are the things that are important to you. Those are your values. She goes, yeah, I guess they are. And then off she went, came back. Her take action piece was that she volunteered she's a math genius. She volunteered to tutor virtually the little next door grade 5 kids that lived next door to her. So she could do some teaching, help others. It wasn't as good as going to school and seeing her friends, no, but she took action and actually felt better because of it. So that is kind of the process in a simple human way of accept, choose your values, and take action. So now we can jump ahead to a couple slides. How to change. So, we've talked about some of the what to do that will boost resilience. These are things like exercise, accepting your emotions, thinking accurately, kind of supporting your own values, committing to your own values to give purpose and meaning. But now we're going to move to the equally important, which is how do you change? And there are 3 areas we're going to look at this. Change is Hard just comes from a book called How to Change. And so if you're interested in that, it's listed at the end. The second thing is, especially during kind of busy and overwhelming times, realizing that we can really make big change through very small steps is good. And we'll talk a bit about that. And then the last one comes from positive psychology, but it's thinking about for yourself, what is my dearest wish? And we will do that one in an experiential way. Next slide, please. So this I'm going to go over pretty quickly, but this is from the How to Change book. And they've gone through systematically, looked at research and talked about all of the different areas that can kind of catch us up when we're trying to make change. So for example, I won't do every one of these, but timing, fresh starts really increase your motivation to change. Unless it's something you're already doing well, and then a fresh start doesn't help. But if we think about it, it's January, it's calendar dates, it's a health threat. Oh, there's a timing reset. It's the metrics that track your performance, and they go back to 0 and you start again. So timing is really important to help us with change. The impulsivity one, that's one of the harder ones. It's that really present bias, as in, I would rather eat this piece of cake right now, although I would like to have less sugar and blah, blah, blah in my life. It's one of the tougher ones to change. And so there's a whole lot of things, but it's, some of the hacks there are that you find ways to make change more fun. You do temptation bundling, that idea of watch TV while you're riding the bike. So the good behavior with the behavior that you'd rather do. So you put them together. One that I found recently with younger clients, like kind of in that 20-ish zone, who are real gamers, which I am not, but they figure it out. But I suggest to them that they figure out if impulsivity, kind of wanting to do what you want to do right now, is a problem. Think of how you are motivated and in your games. How does it keep you involved? And use some of those strategies for yourself. Probably the biggest success was a client, and I didn't want to look negative, but a fairly serious, heavy habit of smoking marijuana. And I said, well, take small steps, whatever. And he did this gamification way to change how he approached smoking, and came back, and 2 weeks later, he's like, I'm down to one a day. And I'm like, wow, like that's a remarkable change that you've made. So there are a whole bunch here. Because of time, I won't go through all of them, but if you're interested, it's a very interesting book, and it's called How to Change. We can go to the next one. Another great way to change is doing it through small steps. And so it may be actually the most successful way to change, because change doesn't really, it doesn't have to be overwhelming and painful. When we think of a big step, a big challenge, that can activate our stress response. When we think of a very small thing, so we ask small questions like, what's one small step I could take to improve my fitness? And then we take small actions. And when I say small, I mean very small. So if clients, exercise is a good example. And if clients are saying, I want to exercise, but I can't this, I won't that. I'm like, okay, what would be a really small step? And whatever they tell me, I say, can you make that smaller? Can you cut it in half? So an example would be someone who started with, well, I'm looking at running shoes online. I'm like, okay, good. It's a very small step. That was a woman who really went, because she ended up 2 years later, but she completed a half marathon. So it's like very small steps. Like I will go down and look at my elliptical every morning when I get up. It's the time I want to exercise. I'm just going to go down and look at it. And I know it sounds laughable, but this works because people just gradually keep moving along. Next slide. This is the Woop, and what Woop is, and we're going to do one. It'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll have questions after that. This is the acronym is for wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. And this is really based on mental contrasting, where we think about now and where we want to be. That's the wish. And then we consider very deeply, in a visualizing way, the obstacles that might get in our way to do it. And it really is and there are lots of references at the end, it really is a very effective strategy for people. And I say, you think of it as a tool. So like a bicycle or a car or a hammer, you can use Woop for little things, and you can use it for lifelong, huge change goals. It can be used for anything. And it just helps you link, what is my dearest wish for myself, and what in myself is holding me back from achieving it. So if people could just kind of sit back, we're going to go through one of these. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever you wish. So I want you to just sit back, make yourself comfortable, and then just follow my voice. So breathing in, I am aware of my in-breath. Breathing out, I am aware of my out-breath. Breathing in, I follow my breath all the way through. Breathing out, I follow my out-breath all the way through. Now just begin with the W in Woop, a wish, concern, or a goal that you may have. And relax. I just realized I better turn my phone on so I can time this. Relax, take a breath, and think about a wish or a concern in your life. This can be in your personal life, your professional life. Something that is challenging, but something that you think it's possible for you to achieve. Just relax and really visualize and think about this. And it could be something you wish to accomplish in a year, in a month, in a day, in a week. It's whatever you decide to Woop, but do choose a wish that you think is possible for you to accomplish. And really just visualize that. Now, think of the first O in Woop, the outcome. What's the best thing that you associate with fulfilling your wish or dream? Think of this outcome, what it would look like, and fully imagine it. Really think about it, visualize, imagine the relevant events or experiences as vividly as possible when you fulfill your wish or dream. Just let your mind go and give your thoughts and images free rein. Whatever your wish or dream, how would its realization make you feel? Take your time. Fully experience the best thing that you associate with fulfilling your wish or dream. And now focus on the second O in Woop, the obstacle. Sometimes things don't work out. And what is it in you that stands in your way? Dig as deep as you can and identify the critical hurdle in your path. When looking at obstacles, people often look at the external world. So they're looking at the people or the circumstances that are in their way. But find the most critical internal obstacle. What is it in you, in yourself, that prevents you from fulfilling your wish or solving your concern? And this obstacle is in you. The goal of Woop is to help us prevent ourselves from getting in our way. And this part here takes more time, patience, bravery, because we do need to take an honest look at ourselves. But once you find your obstacle, you'll have a clearer vision of your wish or dream. Did you focus on the real obstacle? Is there some other obstacle that feels even more important? What thoughts and behaviors that you have might play a role? What habits? Just dig deep enough that you're really addressing an obstacle that's critical for you. And it could be a behavior, an emotion, bad habit, impulse, assumption. Just keep that obstacle in your mind's eye for a few moments and imagine it fully. Really think about it. The obstacle as vividly as you can. Imagine relevant scenarios and events as vividly as you can. And when you are ready, you can move to the P of Woop, the plan. So what can you do to overcome your obstacle? In your mind, name one action or plan you can take, the most effective one you can imagine, and hold it in your mind. Think about when and where that your obstacle might occur. And now form an if-then plan. So if my obstacle happens, then I will do this. If my obstacle in myself happens, then I will do this. Repeat this one more time in your mind. And then just take a deep breath and return. So that's a Woop. It can be slower or longer. And actually, I have a recording I should probably send to Melissa if she wanted to attach it. It's a bit longer than that. And so that's it. We have questions in a sec, but I hope you've learned a bit about what works to boost resilience. And the ones we covered were, of course, briefly physical activity, accepting emotion, having accurate thoughts. So in other words, emotions and thoughts with flexibility, and choosing your own values. The how-tos were, the how-to book has got great stuff, the how to change, take very small steps, and touch into your deepest, dearest wishes with the Woop strategy. And please check out the resources that are at the bottom. They're arranged from light, medium, and full-bodied. The light-bodied is just one thing, a grounding exercise that helps you connect in. The medium body are shorter, they're podcasts, things like that. And then the full body are books and things that a lot of this was based on, if people want to dig deeper. That's it. Thank you very much. And we're ready for questions, which I love.
Awesome. Thanks, Barb. That was great. I know we get lots of feedback that people love having stuff that they can dig into and actually do. So that was great that we could work through that. So we have one question so far, so I'm going to start with that. So the question was, how can one encourage resilience in others that are resistant? As an example, your spouse or your child?
That's an interesting one. It's hard to have. The one probably is, like, I'm thinking of a presentation I did for parents, actually. So this would be for kids, for your children, is actually modeling some of the stuff we've talked about today would be one good tip. So modeling this idea of we accept our emotions, we don't get stuck in them, kind of like we accept everyone has emotions. It's okay to feel angry, but what do we do with it? The hard part is, of course, as always, it's very hard to make others change. We can model, we can support, but it might be actually, if you were to get the How to Change book, they have great tips in there about how to motivate others, because they do have a lot in that book. Some of the ideas being that you have to know that giving advice to others doesn't really help them, it helps you. Like you feel like but ways that you can be a positive coach or a positive mentor, or identify the times that they are doing the things, or just open the conversation of resilience. Those would be some of the strategies that come to mind. If I had more specifics, of course, I always ask questions, so it's harder for me to go back and forth here.
No problem. If the person who asked the question wants to add more to it, feel free to throw it in the chat for me. And somebody else just asked me to go back to this, I'm hoping to this slide, to get the resources. And just so everybody knows, we will send out the slide deck and also some other resources that Barb has put together for us. So those will all come your way with a follow-up email as well for everyone who registered. So those are definitely coming. Are there any other questions? Everyone's probably still focused on their Woop too.
Yeah, I know people get into a bit more of a calm place. Yes.
They're in their zone.
Yeah.
So the question, the previous question, Barb, about motivation.
Yeah.
It's a significant other who has depression and anxiety, but is struggling to have the motivation to go to therapy.
Okay. That's that's a tough one. Yes. I guess there are two parts to this, maybe three. The first is that we know that if people are living with, struggling with major depression and or anxiety, because people can have both at the same time, part of the illness is that people have low energy, are amotivated, low self-worth, no belief that things will get better. So by virtue of being depressed, when I say depressed, I mean in a major depressive episode, like depressed, not sad. Like I may feel sad, but I am not in a major depression. But when people are, it's almost like the seeking help is one of the many things that is, for many reasons, very hard for them to do. So, and I'm not saying this is an excuse, because for loved ones living with that person, it's extremely challenging because they have a range of emotion, sadness, anger. They know that the person's struggling, but it's affecting them. They feel badly for the person. They feel badly for how it impacts their own life. And I think sometimes it's consistent, small to start out, to just say, sometimes depending on your relationship and your strategy, it may be the very assertive, like, I'm really struggling with this. I know you are too. This is kind of my bottom line. I need you to go to the family doctor as a start. You know, go to the GP, go to your GP and let them know how you're feeling. Or can we at least talk about this? Like it's slow. And I guess one of the strategies I use a lot, because I see a lot of parents of older kids, like adult kids, and they're sort of like, what do we do? What do we do? Because we can't force them. And I think one of the things that can be helpful in small steps is to ask about not just going to the, well, you don't want to, but here you should. So I'm going to try to find ways to help you do it. It's really having some empathy and staying in the place of, why don't you want to? What is it about it that this for me comes from forensic, where I would have people were mandated to see me. They'd committed crimes. I'm doing court assessments. They're not happy customers a lot of the time. And some of them would come in and using bad language a lot of the time would basically say, you know, I'm not going to meet with you. I'm not going to talk. And of course they can go back to jail because that's what'll happen. Like I can't force them, but I think 100% of the time it was a slow process, but I would just say, okay, I accept that you don't want to do this, but and it's slow, but it's kind of, I'm curious, like, what is it about this that you don't want to do? They'll say, well, you're an effing asshole. So, okay, that may be true. Like, okay, so what could I do that would make you think I was less? Like you, basically what you do is you in small ways engage, but you're very wanting to understand what the resistance is about, because back to our thinking accurately, we're often telling ourselves stories about why the person isn't doing something, and we're not always right. So it helps us to get as much use our empathy as much as we can to ask questions and fully understand. It's hard work. Get support from others for yourself would be my other tip there.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a harder thing to execute on than it is to say sometimes. Somebody else has asked, so loved the Woop exercise, and they just asked, is there an audio resource or even a YouTube resource for something to use as a guided meditation?
Of Woop? Yes. So right here, what we have up on the screen is where I've put
mylife.org.
That's their website. There's a podcast called The Science of Making Your Dreams Come True, where and the woman's name is Gabrielle Oettingen. She's at the bottom. That's another podcast. I will send, it's slightly longer. It's more like, I don't know, a bit longer than the one we did, but essentially the same. I can just send the recording that I've made to you and you can tack it on if you want, Melissa.
Yep, definitely.
So those would be the ways. And I can also send you my sort of one-page, people could find it, but just the one-page walkthrough of that's in my speaker notes. I'll just send how you could do it, because people can do it sitting. I think it's often better to do it listening, because people can really, it's different than normal goal setting, because you're tapping into sort of unconscious, deeper wishes, which is why I think audio is better for most people. But all of those, the ones like Woop My Life, Science of Making Your Dreams Come True, the Shocking Counterintuitive Science, and if you ever do that course, that well-being course from Yale, the very end has, which may still be free, the Science of Well-being. Towards the very end, she's got a beautiful interview with the woman who developed all of this, and they go through Woop. So those would be lots of Woop resources.
Awesome, thank you. So we are getting close to wrap up time, but I want to put out there's just before we wrap it up, is there anything else that people want to ask for Barb before we take off? I'll give it a couple seconds. And like Barb said, we'll include all of these resources in the email that we send out afterwards as well. So they will all come your way, so that you'll have them. Okay, it's looking like nothing's coming through, which is kind of perfect timing because we're right towards the end. So I do want to thank everybody for coming today. I hope that you got some really good strategies out of this session. For those of you who have been joining us, or if you're new to us, we've been doing these the third Tuesday of every month. Next month focus is on children's mental well-being. So we have a doctor from Western University coming to speak to us about how we can help with our kids and the kids around us. So I will have more information sent out to everybody about that as well. It'll be included in the follow-up to this so that you can see what next month's all about. And as always, have an absolutely amazing rest of your day. And if you need anything, definitely let us know. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.